Today we've got a great malicious compliance story that resulted in one Redditor getting a chunk more money reimbursed to them than they were actually owed. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, our next story is, of course I will move workspaces again. I thought I would share my in-progress malicious compliance at work. A little backstory, my office is an old residential building converted to a flex space, so the interior layout is quirky at best. When I started, my office was in the space that used to be a closet. To say I had very little workspace is an understatement. Fast forward to last week, remodeling has been done and staff moved around, and I've been told that I will have a legit office now. Awesome, right? Wrong. The decision comes down today, no office for me, after I'd already moved into said office. I have to swap with a coworker that has an open design workspaces. Said coworker does not want an office. We're told it doesn't matter what we want, we have to change. Now cue the malicious compliance. I moved desks, but I don't have an office phone. Well, I do, but it goes to nothing. There's no phone line, jack, etc. anywhere near the part of the building I'm now located. Did I mention that a not insignificant part of my job is answering the phone, and if I don't, the phone starts ringing to all the company extensions? So now we're playing a game called How Long Before People That Are Smarter Than Me Figure Out They Made a Big Mistake. All I'm hoping for is that OP takes no flack from anybody if they try to somehow pin the blame on OP. It doesn't even make any sense, but nothing else that's going on in this office is making much sense, and you know a place like that is going to be the first to try to blame the personnel for problems introduced by the weird management. Bodron777 commented, I hate playing musical offices. I worked for a company that had a floor in a high-rise in town, lots of offices. My job was all computer-based, and I was the one guy in the entire company that did my job to keep almost everything else running smoothly, so I would sit at my desk all day. Meanwhile, the majority of the others were salespeople who were gone half the time but still got offices. Then one day, we moved to a new building. New office had almost the same number of individual offices, but we also picked up some new salespeople. I was told that I would get my own office again, but when I moved in, my manager said this one was temporary. Sure enough, a week later and I'm moving to another office which also ended up being temporary. About 2 moves later, the bosses started adding cubicles to a narrow hallway and I got shoved into one. Meanwhile, every salesperson got an office, though some had to double up, and proceeded to be gone all the time on sales meetings. Most offices in the place were lights off because the person was away making sales pitches and whatnot, so the spaces were totally wasted on them. A few people pointed out that it would make more sense for the sales team to take cubicles instead of putting me, another engineer, and our accounts receivables lady out in the hallway. Well, that was shot down immediately, but I was promised that I would have an office one day. To make my job harder, I was positioned in a spot where any of the sales team had to walk by me to get to their office. And it was just too easy for them to stop, get my attention, and either just chat or ask me something that was better left in an email. I was constantly interrupted, and projects I could do in an hour would be repeatedly interrupted or delayed because people had to ask me something or put me on another project. I hated it. Plus, people were always just looking over my shoulder to watch what I was doing. 6 months later, people had been constantly shuffled around in offices, except for me and my little cubicle. The others in the hallway now had personal offices, so I was alone in the hallway. At the same time, the boss responsible for these shenanigans was complaining that no one decorated their spaces, which he wanted for when our CEO came walking through. He wanted the place looking good. We all told him it's hard to decorate when you could move in a week. Then one day, COVID comes around and everyone went remote. The literal week before that, I finally got my office. Now I'm 100% remote and still don't have an office. OP responded commenting, "It's a similar story for me. I'm the only person that's always in office during business hours, but I don't need a dedicated space. I'm also now directly across from the restroom and can hear everything that happens in there. Yuck." Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy stories of malicious compliance, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? Our next story is, if it's not your job, don't touch it. At my old job, I worked in an office where things ran smoothly only because people helped each other out. The official job titles didn't mean much, we just did what needed to get done. I handled admin work, but if the phone rang and no one else was around, I would answer it. If a client needed something quick, I would jump in and help. One day, my new manager called me into her office. She said she noticed I was doing tasks outside my role and that I should stay in my lane. Her exact words were, "If it's not your job, don't touch it." Okay, boss, you got it. So the next time a client called and no one was around to answer, I let it ring. Printer jam? Not my job. Mail sitting at the front desk? Not my problem. Coworker needed a quick file lookup while swamped? Sorry, not my department. It took less than 2 days for the chaos to hit. Missed calls, delays, complaints. My manager asked why I wasn't helping like before, and I reminded her, calmly, I'm staying in my lane, like you said. Let's just say the tone changed real quick. A week later, she sent out a staff-wide email saying we should all collaborate as needed to keep things moving. People like OP, those Swiss Army knife workers in the workplace, those are the ones you want to make sure that you can keep around. You give them the bonuses, you give them the raises they want. You don't go to them and say, "Hey, Swiss Army knife, I noticed you have all these attachments that you're accomplishing and helping us out. Can you just stick to being a bottle opener and only that?" Like, it is almost offensively bad manglement to see somebody that is willingly going above and beyond their job duties and telling them to knock that off. Tremenda Karusha commented, "It's pretty annoying how strict rules can mess up teamwork and cause chaos. Like, who even makes those decisions? When does someone say, hey, maybe we should all just help each other out instead of sticking to the letter of the law?" Our next story is, you have to follow the schedule. Okay, guess I'll just sit here then. I used to work at a small retail store where the manager was obsessed with sticking to the schedule. Like, no helping with the tasks that weren't written in your official hourly breakdown. One day, I finished my assigned duties early, stocking a small section and organizing a shelf. I saw a coworker struggling with a heavy delivery in the back and offered to help, like any normal human would. Manager saw me and stormed over saying, "What are you doing? That's not your scheduled task." I explained I was just helping out since I was done early. They say, "Doesn't matter, follow your schedule exactly." Okay then. So I went back to my area, which was spotless, and just stood there for 2 full hours, staring at the already stocked shelves. Customers asked for help? Sorry, not my department. Boxes were piling up in the back? Not my task. At the end of the shift, the manager gave me a weird look and said, "You didn't do much today," and I just smiled back and said, "I was following the schedule exactly like you asked." She never said that again. Here we go again, the exact same thing. Swiss Army knife, Mr. I want to help the company out. Why would you pull out the metaphorical big rubber hammer and smash it over this person's head who just wants to make life easier for the rest of the employees and, by extension, the business? And it's not even fair to OP either because they don't have anything else to do. I'm assuming you're not allowed to have a phone on you while you're on the floor or whatnot, so I imagine there's no easy way to just pass the time by. Can't pull up the good old Storytime channel in the middle of the shift. Mr. Conberg commented, "I worked at a world-famous ski area, high turnover that made training a constant need. One of the VPs, a grizzled World War II vet, started a program titled Train the Trainers. So us trainers were the first guinea pigs. Actually learned a lot about humans and how to motivate. Also how to retain the good ones. So throwing the clipboard with the schedule in the area behind the driver's seat solved a lot of problems." Our next story is, can only buy 2 beers at a time? Years ago, I was at a late-season Cleveland Browns game. At the Browns Stadium, they limit you to only buying 2 alcoholic beverages at a time. I guess this is supposed to cut down on drinking, so my buddy and I took turns going to the concession stand to buy 2 beers at a time, 1 for each of us. The game being late in the season and the Browns being awful, by the second half the stadium was mostly empty. So when it was my turn to go buy beers, I was the only one in line at the concession stand. I ordered my 2 beers, and then when they handed them to me, I took a couple steps away, set the beers on the ground, walked back up to the concession stand, and ordered 2 more beers. The employee chuckled and said, "I've never seen anyone do that before," and he served me 2 more beers. My buddy was pretty surprised and super excited when I came back to our seats with 4 beers or 2 beers each. You know, all OP had to say was, I was at a late-season Cleveland Browns game. Just that sentence alone, based on the greater history of the Cleveland Browns, you can almost assume what the second half of the story is going to entail. Either something so stupid that you get ejected and banned for life from the stadium or something, or something to do with beer. Well, besides the fact that it's literally in the title of the story, but let's ignore that. Our next story is short and silly story at McDonald's that happened today. I had 6,000 points for a free Big Mac on the McDonald's app, so I swung by to get it. Happened to have 35 cents in the car, so I added a piece of extra cheese, paid at the window, and got my burger. And after taking a bite, I realized no extra cheese. Thought about letting it go, but dang it, I paid for that and figured I could get a second burger out of it for my wasted time. So I went back into the drive-thru, waited behind 3 cars, and when I got up to the drive-thru window, the girl had the audacity to just hand me a cold piece of cheese. So I was like, no, I already started eating it without the cheese before I realized and had to wait in line again, so I would like it remade. She checked with her manager and came back and said, okay, but you're gonna have to give me the old burger back. Nodding, I picked up the burger and proceeded to take the 3 largest bites you'd ever seen and left nothing but a single bite and a pile of lettuce. Mouth stuffed full of Big Mac, sauce all over my face, I gave her the biggest crap-eating grin as I handed her the box containing what was left. She actually grinned back. She must think her manager is anal too. I got a new one with 2 pieces of cheese a half a minute later. 35 cents well spent today. P.S. Screw any manager that would allow food to be wasted like that just to satisfy their own ego. P.P.S. I would never do this to a small locally owned business, but McDonald's? I have no shame. Edit, it seems some people think I acted like a Karen in this situation. You're entitled to your opinions, but I would wager McDonald's screwed all of you out of far more than just a piece of cheese in the past. My McDonald's screwed up again punch card was full, so this time, I chose not to let it go. To be fair, for those of us that do get fast food, especially from McDonald's, I think we've all had that experience where we order something, we pull out of the drive-thru, and especially unfortunately you find out like when you get home or whatnot, they missed something or messed something up. It certainly worked out for OP, but 2 Big Macs ain't working out for their macros that day, I'll tell you what. Our next story is, yes sir, only as you say. My manager was new to the company, and I've been here over 18 years and pretty well run my area solo. We're a high-end production facility, and I'm part of the incoming quality and test engineering team. I always stay well ahead of production, along with performing my other task. I consult with the production and inventory supervisors daily to ensure I know what's on the horizon and have anything they will need ready well ahead of time. I also get requests from the development engineering group to test new products during development. All of this requires strategic planning and the ability to shift direction at any time to keep a flow going. In steps this new manager. We had an issue from the first meeting. Seems like he doesn't like being in a room where he isn't the smartest one there, so after a few weeks of getting to know the place, he sends an email. No one can alter OP's schedule without going through me first. I will set his priorities and work hours going forward. I knew exactly what this would do to my balanced flow. Sure enough, the next week we had to produce design qualifications and a customer surprise arrival to watch the testing. My manager left instructions that I was to remain on production material only. No one could get in contact with him. He had signed out as a work-from-home day, but he wasn't answering any of the numbers he had given. Turns out they did eventually track him down at the local park with his kids, but not before the customer had left, mad and frustrated. The next week, he called me into his office and he had the gall to try to write me up for not testing the product when the client arrived. I handed him a printed copy of his email and insisted that the write-up be witnessed by a member of the HR team. He reset the meeting for 3 days later, giving him time to prep the HR rep to his side of the story. First question she asked was why I didn't test the products when asked, and I handed her the email. I was told if I violated this new policy he created, I would be written up. I would like to file a harassment complaint against this manager. His voice cracked as he stammered out, "Now, let's just slow this down a bit." The HR rep knew she could ignore my charges. Even if she didn't agree, the company requires all harassment claims to be investigated. The meeting ended there. The harassment claim was documented as a verbal warning, and for the last 2 years, he won't engage with me at all. He won't even let me know when we're having a staff meeting. I hear about it the next day from the others. Suits me. The less I see of him, the better. So am I wrong to say that this manager is extremely lucky that all they got was a verbal warning? Like, in a business of that stature with an HR representative, the fact that they went to OP and said, do this and you're getting written up, they don't do that thing they were told not to do, and then they turn around and say, why didn't you do that thing I told you not to do? I'm writing you up. It's crazy that that manager walked away with a verbal warning. Like, this guy wasn't just ready to throw OP under the bus, they were ready to put that bus in reverse and drive back and forth a few extra times. Unconscious Exercise commented, that's actually retaliation on his part and illegal. I would file that complaint with HR and also send any documents of this you have off to a separate outside email account. Be prepared to file a claim with the EEOC in your state. This is coming from someone in leadership for 3 decades. I wouldn't tolerate this behavior from anyone around me. I didn't do the same thing with a previous employer for similar behavior and won. The thing you need is documentation of everything, including the fact that you received corrective action of any type for following his strict instructions and what's being done now. Good luck. Our next story is, manager told me to CC her on every client email, so I did, including the ones where she's the problem. I work in client services, mostly just relaying info between clients and our internal teams. My manager isn't super involved, but last month she goes, can you CC me on every client email, just for transparency? I was like, sure thing, so I CC'd her on literally everything, including the emails where clients asked why she missed their meeting, or where I had to explain delays from her not sending over files. A few days later, she starts replying to someone with, let's take this offline. One client hit back with, this wouldn't be an issue if you'd shown up. She hasn't brought up CCing since, but if she does, I've got drafts ready. Well, I'm gonna give this one a big solid E for effort. At least they wanted to make the impression that maybe they would show up to those meetings or care for those meetings or something. Caribou16 commented, a few years ago had a new boss who was 1, grossly incompetent, and 2, an extreme micromanager. A heck of a combo. She would swoop into your project with absolutely no idea what was going on, make a bunch of arbitrary decisions thinking it was leadership, then as soon as crap hit the fan from implementing everything she said, she would disappear. These were pretty big, long-term, multi-million-dollar capital projects that in some cases had already been going on for months and years before she was even hired. So, one time, she again joins one of my calls and starts saying this, saying that, making nonsensical recommendations that pretty much showed she was completely ignorant of even what the scope was at a high level, etc., etc. The executive stakeholder for our customer interrupts her, addresses me, and asked, who the heck is this person and why is she talking? I, as diplomatically as possible, explained that this is Lydia, not real name, our North American PMO director and my direct manager. He said, I see. Lydia, I never want to hear your voice again on one of these calls. OP has had everything running smoothly for 9 months now, and to be blunt, it's pretty clear you have no idea what the freak you're talking about. Apparently, he then called up our sales team who sold the project and complained to them too, which meant a bunch of sales VPs in our org were all bent out of shape about her, and she was ordered to stay out of all project-related communications with this customer. It didn't stop her from trying to constantly reinsert herself, going as far as drafting emails and sending them to me to copy, paste, or send, so it would look like they were coming from me and not her, which I ignored. She lasted another 3 months, which I assume was to allow a PIP to run its course, before she was canned. Our next story is, you need to be more energetic on calls. 10-4. This incident is from around 8 weeks ago, though some important context is that 20 years ago, at university, I was a DJ for a show on my student radio station. Here, I learned the radio host voice for between songs. Extremely positive, short burst. So, onwards. I was a claims adjuster for an auto insurer. My role served as first notification of loss, confirming what level of cover was held, if a vehicle was likely to be repaired or salvaged, potential liability outcome, and any underwriting concerns. My natural tone of voice is quite flat and professional, so while a customer may have disliked certain outcomes, it was never hostile or complaint-worthy. However, one team leader audited a telephone call I handled. correct liability, correct offering of a repairer, correct attempt to capture third-party claimant, correct timescales, incorrect customer mirroring and service. You have set the correct expectations, they said, but you're far too flat and come across disinterested. That is not how we handle claims. The customer didn't complain, I said. They even thanked me on the call. They reply, our call standards are high service and care. You must be more energetic. I need to feel you on the call. 10-4, I said. You'll get more energy, I thought. So from that moment on, full deployment of my radio announcer voice. Customer can't have repairs due to damage? Your vehicle has rolled over. The repair will be more than the vehicle value. It's a total loss. You get no courtesy vehicle. Thank you for calling. Good afternoon. Another insurer disputes liability? I understand you support your client, but the facts of the case have my insured established and correctly proceeding. No, I'm not willing to concede this matter. Yes, I am aware you are litigating. You must serve papers at gives address. Thank you for calling and have an awesome day. To make matters even more ridiculous, my office had desks that rise and fall at a button press, so I would be stood up, voice projecting over the entire team straight to the team leader. Other adjusters would be muting calls while laughing, others taking bets on what threats the other caller was saying, while my leaders stood in their seat, nailed in place by the call energy they felt. The cherry on the cake being external auditors marking said calls as top marks all across the board. Exemplary service and understanding attitude. My leader was not impressed and could do nothing. Now, I don't know why, but OP talking about their radio voice and then reading what they were saying, it was giving me like a weirdly cheerful version of, you stole fizzy lifting drinks, you bumped into the ceiling which now has to be washed and sterilized, so you get nothing, you lose, good day, sir. I think this is the second time I've referenced Willy Wonka in the last 2 weeks and I'm not quite sure why. Scoredgy commented, I used to work with corporate clients in Latin America a lot because I'm fluent in Spanish, was always top pick for those assignments just because of that, and one of the PMs one of our big customers employed had something like a legit certification for public broadcasting. It was always such a blast to go on conference call with him because he had this crisp, clean, perfectly enunciated baritone and he spoke with an appropriate level of energy, enthusiastic but not over the top, sounded happy to be there and helping everyone. It was only half an act. He was also pretty friendly in private and off the clock, just way chiller, and he would still enunciate really clearly even after many, many beers. Our next story is, the water park is off limits. Okay. This story wasn't an intentional malicious compliance response, it just sort of happened that way. This happened about 25 years ago. Every year, my high school would organize a school trip to an amusement park just outside of town. In order to go on the trip, you had to fork over $10 and fill out a form. If you were under 16, your parent had to sign the form. Standard crap, but there was one teacher in charge who made it a point to remind us constantly that we weren't allowed to enter the water park, otherwise we were allowed to do what we wanted so long as we didn't get in trouble or do anything that reflected poorly on the school. Fair enough. Now, like I said at the start of this story, this malicious compliance wasn't intentional, but suffice it to say, we arrived at the bus about 15 minutes before it was scheduled to return to town, soaked to the bone. If looks could eviscerate, we would have been dusted right then and there. So he demands to know what happened, and we told him. You see, there's a ride at this park that is kind of a simple-looking roller coaster. It's not very high and only has one drop, but the caveat is the track is actually a slide with water, and the drop is over a body of water that causes a kind of wave that splashes both the rider and whoever is standing on the bridge across from the drop. We all stumbled across this ride while we were wandering the park and debated whether or not we should go on it. We decided, unanimously even, that technically this ride wasn't in the water park, so riding it wasn't actually against the rules. We rode it twice. By the time we finished explaining, he was glaring daggers at each one of us, and after a pause, he just pointed behind him and said, "Get on the freaking bus." Everyone on the bus stared at us while we boarded, either thinking we were heroes or rebels. Whatever the case, I still laugh about this story whenever I tell it, and one of my friends suggested I post this on Reddit under Malicious Compliance, so here we are. I mean, they were upset, but they didn't break the rules. They didn't go into the water park. Not gonna lie though, if I was one of those other kids on the bus and I saw them boarding, soaking wet, I probably would have assumed that they did sneak off and go to the water park, and I would be incredibly jealous, because for as much of a crappy swimmer as I am, I do enjoy me a good water park. Our next story is, you want a proper British cup of tea? Alright then, mate. So a few years back, I had an American friend visit the UK for the first time. Lovely guy, but a bit loud, very confident, and full of opinions about how things should be done. On his second day staying with me, he says something like, "Man, I love tea, but you Brits always make it too weak. I want a proper British cup of tea, strong enough to stand a spoon in. Show me how it's really done." Now, anyone who's grown up in the UK knows we all have wildly different ideas of what a proper cuppa is. Some like it dark and bitter, some pale and milky. But Dave was being a bit obnoxious about it, telling me, a born and bred Brit, how to make British tea. So I decided to give him exactly what he asked for. I rummaged through the cupboard and found a box of Yorkshire tea. Boiled water, chucked in 4 bags into his oversized mug. He wanted a real cup, not one of our tiny dainty ones. Poured the water straight over them and let it brew for 10 minutes. No milk, no sugar, just black, bitter tannin soup. Then I handed it to him with the straightest face I could manage. "There you go, mate. Proper British tea, builder's style." He took a sip and immediately went red in the face, started coughing like he had just inhaled pipe smoke. "Dang, this tastes like a tree," he wheezes. "Well," I said, "you did ask for proper British tea. That's how me dad drinks it, puts hairs on your chest." To his credit, he tried to finish it but gave up halfway through and asked for water instead. For the rest of his trip, he politely declined tea and stuck to coffee. Well, at least OP didn't follow that up by putting actual grounds in the coffee and saying, "This is how we do it here too." We don't even worry about any of that distilling nonsense, we just want it straight from the grains. Our next story is, doesn't add up? Make it add up? Well, okay then. This happened many, many years ago when I was a systems administrator for a now-defunct company. I was to go to training, and I ended up going to Canada to train on some then new systems. No biggie. I kept my receipts and ended up overspending a bit because, well, I got to see the sights and got to have some tasty food. When I got back, I submitted my expense report. I wrote down the numbers and factored in the current exchange rate, Canadian dollars to US dollars, and figured that was that. I mean, being honest, right? Well, oh my god, my boss's boss went to my boss and complained that I couldn't even add anything up. You see, the amount I was showing they owed me was less than what the receipt showed. Canadian dollars were maybe worth 65 cents of American dollars, so it got rejected, and my boss's boss said to make them match. I looked at my boss and said, "You know that's Canadian, right?" My boss just shrugged and said, "Make him happy and make the numbers add up." Well, okay then. I added the Canadian dollars up and didn't factor in the exchange rate. So instead of requesting a reimbursement of, for example, not the actual numbers, 650 US dollars, I put down 1,000 Canadian. They cheerily paid it. Only me and my boss knew, but it was so much more trouble trying to do the right thing. No one ever tried to correct it. On the plus side, it pretty much paid for the extras on the trip. ETA, well, this blew up, didn't it? Kind of surprised me since it was such a ridiculous story. Thank you for your comments. For those of you who are bashing Americans, I'm an American. Not all of us are freaking idiots, but the ones who are seem to be Dunning-Kruger candidates. And they have big mouths and stupid attitudes. To paraphrase The Sixth Sense, I see stupid people. They're everywhere. They walk around and don't know they're stupid. Let's try not to let politics rule. It's a sad state of affairs when many US citizens are so clueless. Well, I don't know when exactly OP's story happened. In the very first sentence, they said it happened many, many years ago. Thankfully, these days, I feel like most systems have currency conversion built in, especially considering all the payment portals these days have tax requirements built into them for things that exceed $600 in the US. So on the bright side, it probably wouldn't happen these days, but on the brighter side, hope he got more money anyways. So hey, if it can get me some extra money, I'm happy to let my fellow Americans be called dumb. Slackers FTW commented, I grew up in the US not far from the Canadian border. I used to always laugh when I saw any coin-operated machine with a sign that said, "Do not use Canadian change." I'm not sure about the rest of the coins, but Canadian quarters are the same size as US quarters. With the exchange rate, vending machines were losing money if Canadian change was used for the purchase. Our next story is changing the definition of overtime? Great! The company I used to work for changed their definition of overtime to be any hours worked over 40 per week to avoid paying overtime to people who stayed later on any given day and tried to encourage them to take that time in lieu. I.e., if you worked 10 hours on Monday, you were encouraged to work 6 hours on Tuesday instead of claiming 2 hours of overtime pay. Here, overtime pays at 1.5 times your normal hourly rate, even if you're salaried. When they changed these rules, they forgot about my team. 99% of the company worked regular 9 to 5 Monday to Friday shifts, but my team worked a 24/7 rotating shift. Just by the nature of working shifts like that, sometimes you end up working up to 55 hours in a single calendar week by doing normal 8-hour shifts with no overtime. This was fine because it meant the next week you worked 25 hours or so. It always averaged out to be 80 hours a fortnight. But by the wording of this new rule, which was written into our contracts by the union so they couldn't go back on it, we were suddenly entitled to loads of overtime. It added up to about $6,000 per year in extra pay from doing the exact same hours as before. So I'm not trying to be like Mr. Critic or anything, but I do feel like it very loosely fits the definition of malicious compliance, even if it does end up getting you $6,000 more per year. That said, this is definitely a level of compliance that I would love to adhere to personally. Chris Riley 42 commented, "This reminds me of what happened in Ontario back in the 90s. Our premier got the idea that instead of government employees getting overtime, we would take comp time, paid time off instead. It said in the legislation that contracts could not be extended to cover comp time. I was fighting forest fires at this time. That is not a 9-to-5 job. By the end of July, we had some crews that had banked so much comp time that they were going to have to take the rest of the year off. Our union sent the premier a letter. As of X date, your cottage will no longer be getting forest fire fighting coverage since we're all going home to ride out our comp time. Strangely enough, we got declared an emergency service and exempt from comp time soon after that. Our next story is, you can't park here. Okay, so some background. I'm a delivery driver working for one of the big delivery companies in the US. Today's delivery route includes a very high-end neighborhood with very narrow streets that have cars parked on both sides, so even more narrow for my big delivery truck. My next package is a big one, definitely a desk or a flat pack furniture weighing at least 80 pounds. I stop at the address and park my vehicle basically in the middle of the street, but I will be quick and I have my flashers on, so no problem. From the delivery address, a little old lady with the anger of Satan comes flying out yelling, "You can't park here!" I say back, "Okay, well, where can I park to deliver this?" She says, "The nearest parking for non-residents is at the tennis court a half-mile away." Lugging an 80-pound desk a half-mile when I'm already stupid far behind, and it's 110 degrees Fahrenheit outside, no thanks. "Wait a minute," reads label on package. "Are you Karen?" She responds, "Well, yeah, but what does that have to do with you parking here?" Malicious compliance. Pulls emergency brake, slams vehicle and drive, seatbelt still on. I'm not in park, so not parked. Wiggles heavy big package out the window while holding down the brake, placing it standing up at her feet, scanned as left with resident. I yell as I drive off, "Package delivered safely, have a nice day." I think I hear her say, "Wait, you can't just..." As I drive off, I look into my side view to see a very confused old lady looking at her desk and then looking at my delivery truck barely fitting down her street. Yes, there were better ways of handling this, but it would all require me to walk half a mile in the heat, either to leave a notice or carry a desk. Either way, I simply didn't have time for that. Not the best story on here, but it made me feel good in the moment, and I felt like I had to tell someone. Yeah, I would not be cut out for a job like that, not just because of resenting people who come along like this Karen, but also it just feels like the kind of job where there's not much glory to be had. Like a job that they're just trying to squeeze your head harder and harder every chance they can to ground you into the most profitable dust in the 110-degree Fahrenheit heat. Aquamarine Jello commented, "The audacity to know you ordered a package and still want to be nasty to a driver is wild. Like, if I'm not expecting a package and there's a truck blocking my driveway, I'm still not gonna act up and I'm gonna wait and be patient, but the fact that she had to know she ordered a big old box and still had attitude? Girl, what?" Our next story is, apartment pool required a towel. I'm fully clothed. Apartment pool attendant said that I need a towel to sit down on the lounge chairs, even though I'm fully clothed. Must be a new rule as I've been here 4 years. I said the rule is for people who are in bathing suits, which is very obvious. I said my sweatshirt is made of cotton and so are towels, so it's just a towel I'm wearing around me. He said that it doesn't satisfy the rule, so after a quick trip to my apartment, I asked him if it specifies what size the towel must be, to which he replied there isn't a size rule. So I said great, and placed my 1-inch by 1-inch towel back into my pocket and sat back down. OP actually included a link at the bottom of their post, and it's just a picture of a corner of a towel. I would say it looks like OP took some scissors to just like a hand towel and cut the very end of the corner off. Here's my towel. Might be barely enough to just dry off one eyebrow. Our next story is, teacher told me to only use textbook definitions, so I did, and suddenly that wasn't enough. Back in high school, I had a science teacher who hated when students explained things in their own words. I loved writing creative real-world examples in my answers, made things easier to remember, and showed I understood the concept. But after a test where I got marked down for not quoting the textbook exactly, she said, "From now on, stick to the definitions from the book. Word for word, no paraphrasing." Okay, fair enough. So for the next test, I followed her instructions to the letter. Every answer was verbatim from the textbook. Even the questions that clearly needed some explanation or thought, I just dropped in the definition and moved on. I ended up getting a lower grade than usual. She marked a few answers incomplete or not fully explained. I politely reminded her that she told us to use only textbook definitions, nothing extra. Showed her the note I wrote down from class. Her response? "Well, I meant stick to the definition, but also explain your understanding." Oh, so now it's both. After that, the rule quietly disappeared, and we were encouraged to use both the textbook and our own understanding. Sometimes doing exactly what you're told is the best way to prove a point. So, to be fair, the only way we could properly judge this high schooler is to have an example of what kind of answer they would have given. Can I just say though, this post took me back to something that irritated me back in like 4th grade, where I had a teacher who was so insistent on complete sentences on like worksheets and crap. Like if the question was, what is an island, and you wrote down a landmass completely surrounded by water, it would be marked incomplete because it wasn't a proper sentence. You would have had to have written something like, an island is a landmass completely surrounded by water, for her to be happy. Like, who cares? Lost Vermonter commented, "OP, I will say your teacher was potentially not malicious in their request. There can be a fine line between creative and clunky and verbose, and it can be maddening when a significant number of your students provide the latter in fairly straightforward questions. It may have been best to use your creativity and anecdotes in your notes and provide more concise answers on exams. While being able to provide examples and significantly rephrase the textbook shows understanding, so does being able to answer concisely, which may have been what your teacher meant, but admittedly communicated poorly." Our next story is, put them back where you found them. Okay. So my aunt is super into those ceramic plates, like she has a few sets and treats them like they're super fragile. She calls them her babies. She's always warning everyone to stay away from them. So here's the thing, she has these cabinets that are not exactly strong anymore, and in it are her precious plates. They literally look like they're about to fall. I noticed it and thought I was helping her when I shifted the plates and put them in the other cabinets that looked stronger, but when she found out, she got really upset and she said, "I warned you to stop messing with my plates, I like them where they are." And I pointed out why I transferred the plates. She said she didn't care, I should take them back. So I put them right back where I found them, and then days later, the cabinet fell and so did all of her precious baby's plates. Well, guess who was not wrong? Honestly, I thought that last line was going to be something like, well, guess who was blamed for causing the accident or something? OP, you massacred my precious babies. Hunting Prior Nan commented, and if you chose to talk to her, you'll find that she believes there were thousands. As a matter of fact, your nephew should be prepared when she passes away. They will be mentioned in the will and be treated like half of her estate worth. Our next story is, you think I'm fudging my hours? You're right, here are my real hours. I started working for a nonprofit in 2019 after being a volunteer member since 2000. It was supposed to be temporary for 3 months or so, but the nonprofit dragged their feet hiring a permanent replacement. I'm fairly well off, not filthy rich, but debt-free and comfortable, and didn't need the money, so I never billed for my hours after working 15 months full-time. It was supposed to be $25 per hour, Canadian currency, but I was willing to work for free if they just found a replacement in a reasonable time. They were pressuring me for an invoice, so I finally invoiced them for 40 hours per week for 15 months, and it was about high 60,000. They were livid for a variety of reasons I didn't understand. They accused me of lying about my hours because I was a new father and my wife had gone back to work after maternity leave, and there's no way I could have worked that much. When I told them I had my son in daycare instead of staying at home with him, they sarcastically said, "Now you know what it's like to work an actual job like the rest of us." They were mad that I wasn't volunteering my time anymore like I used to, but I insisted I was, and that my build time was only for the TV bingo fundraiser and not for any other nonprofit activities. They didn't believe me. I tried to tell them my hours were actually more than I billed for, and my hourly rate is greatly reduced compared to what I normally charge for all the work I was doing. IT, e-commerce, web design, marketing, HR operations, bookkeeping, TV production, etc. But they said they didn't care about the rate reduction. They insisted that I charge my normal rates for my actual hours and then deduct 10 hours a week for volunteering, which is about 10 times more hours than any of them volunteer for. Okay, bet. I started charging them $40 to $125 per hour depending on the task. I recorded all my tasks and hours in great detail. I charged for any time I spent doing what was normally volunteer work for the nonprofit. Then I finally deducted 10 hours a week. I was billing an average of 50 hours a week after the volunteer hours were deducted. I also took the opportunity to start hiring more people under me on their dime so I could work way less than I did in the first 15 months, but still get paid the same, if not more. They couldn't say anything because it was exactly what they asked for. I was billing $1,000 per week before malicious compliance, and then about $3,000 per week after malicious compliance, which I started trimming back down closer to $1,000 a week after cutting my own hours. These guys kept doubling down and accusing me of incompetence and fraud over the next year and a half that I continued working, but I didn't care anymore. They turned my passion into a crappy job that I didn't need, so I stayed until all my amazing employees were hopefully set up for success and wrote that nonprofit out of my life for good. I didn't feel any guilt over being paid for my time with them because I'd raised more money for them in 30 months. $30 million gross, about $20 million net, than they raised in the 100 years before then. There's something so ironic to me about the fact that OP is bending over backwards for this nonprofit, getting this nonprofit massive revenue, putting in so many hours, trying to do all these things to keep it going, and every step of the way, everybody else in this nonprofit are like talking bad about OP, smearing their character, just about outright saying OP's a liar. OP's doing all of this great work and wanting to even volunteer time and effort and cut funds that they could have gotten for themselves to ultimately help people through this nonprofit, I'm assuming, and everybody in the nonprofit just takes a dump on OP the whole way. Many Collection 8889 commented, I used to work for a company who did consulting for nonprofits, and they said the number one mistake nonprofits made, far and away, was treating their volunteers like free labor. The people running an NFP would spend their time doing the fulfilling and fun stuff and then use volunteers to do all the menial labor. The volunteers hate it, and the NFP guilt trips them by saying, "This is what needs to be done if you care about X," so the volunteers not only quit, but lose their passion for the cause as well. Plus, the only ones who stay tend to be nasty themselves, causing a downward spiral. The best thing an NFP can do is find those things that make people love the cause and have volunteers do those things, pay for any necessary menial labor, and then have the core members focus on admin and fundraising. Logic Sun commented, "I like your take on this and learned something too about nonprofits. My take, people work for free because they like what they're doing. You call it doing the fulfilling and fun stuff, and I agree. Why else would someone give up precious time? You know how they say a job has to pay you because otherwise you wouldn't show up? If you make volunteering a job, of course, people won't stick around. The more experience I gain, the better I get at spotting volunteer opportunities that sound a lot like an org stumping for free labor. Let's say clerical tasks. Hey, if pushing paperwork is your thing, I'm not knocking it, it's just not my thing." Good stuff. Our next story is restaurant that didn't want to feed its employees. So I was a cook for a good long portion of my life. The last restaurant I worked at was a pretty nice farm-to-table Italian place. I really liked the owners and had worked for them at a previous restaurant, and I also liked having 2 vacation weeks and insurance, so I followed them to this new place. Now, the owners were great. The GM, however, was a stubborn and stingy person. We opened the place up with the idea that there would be a family meal every day before the dinner shift started. Nothing crazy expensive, just a salad and pasta for everyone. Pretty quickly though, it just turned into pasta, then eventually into nothing at all, with no replacement meal plan for the employees at all. I understand the need to keep costs down, especially at a new restaurant, but this was getting ridiculous. There were days where I would end up working a double and very angrily just eating a Cliff Bar during the whole workday. I'm serious about the GM being a penny-pinching bee though. The most egregious example I have is if any servers or cooks made a mistake, they were expected to purchase their mistake. There was one time I made a pasta dish by mistake and refused to buy it. Mistakes happen, dang it. My assistant GM knew it was going to be a big deal, so he ended up purchasing it. Eventually, hours started getting cut and people were being let go. I'd been given a couple of split shifts a week. I hated them so much but needed the money. I was expected to come in and open, work a couple of lunch, leave for a couple of hours, and come back for the dinner shift. So after a few weeks of these shifts, it became pretty routine. It allowed me to get lunch either nearby or at home. Except one day, it was unexpectedly busy for lunch. We got really slammed and couldn't really catch up, so they asked me if I could stay and help prep for dinner. Now, me being maliciously compliant said that I planned on having lunch during that time, but I'll stay if they let me have something good. I'm just thinking pasta with meat on it. They said, "We can't do that." So I said I can't stay then. The look on both of my bosses' faces said it all. They of course couldn't back down, but I wasn't gonna let them walk all over me, especially when I'm just following and expecting to work my scheduled hours. I came back a couple hours later with a full belly and worked a pretty busy dinner shift. My split shifts didn't last too much longer after that. There was one more time when I had an unexpected Thursday night off, but I was asked to come in and wash dishes. Once again, I needed the money and I'm not above washing dishes, so I said yes. Now, I've done dishes before for my normal pay and it wasn't a problem. That's what I was expecting, my normal pay. I come back and they ask me to please clock in under the dish button they had just created for me. I asked if the pay was different and I was told yes, it's a couple dollars less. I nearly walked out. I only stayed because my coworkers would have a much worse day without me there, but I was livid. My assistant GM tried to offer me some food scraps, but I looked at him and refused. Then I remembered that dish employees get a free meal that nobody took advantage of because of the cheap GM. I told my assistant GM I wanted a pork rigatoni pasta dish with peppers in it, and he was completely caught off guard. "What? Who's paying for that?" he says to me. I merely reply with, "Dish gets a free meal," and walk away. A few minutes later, I get my lovely pasta dish. I go sit down for a few minutes, savor every bite, and come back to smiles from my coworkers and my GM not looking at me. The dish button was removed from my clock-in screen after that. You know, to be fair, I could understand where they had this policy of everybody eats before dinner shift or whatnot, and then realizing that's not really a cost-effective thing to do every shift. Family is family, but we got margins we gotta get by with. That said, it really kind of sounded more like OP was just at the mercy of needing the money. Adorable Event 2752 commented, "My girlfriend owned a restaurant for 35 years. Every day, the cooks are encouraged to choose a time during their shift when they're hungry, go into the dining room, and order what they like, where they're treated to a meal and served the wonderful food they make. Her cooks were paid well above the standard pay for her city. She also included managers and cooks in profit sharing. She would share a spreadsheet with all expenses, earnings, and profit. I think cooks earned about 4% based on their hours and seniority, and it nearly doubled their pay each month. The general manager eventually earned over 8% of the net profit. The cooks got 2-week vacation, time off for sick days and emergencies, their birthday off, tuition reimbursement for their children who attended college, and a retirement plan with matching funds. This is a small Mexican restaurant in Texas where an average day's gross is currently hitting about $5,000. With no major expenses for the month, they make over 40% net, sometimes as much as 50%. So the cook's profit sharing at the average 3% runs between $60 and $80 a day on top of their regular pay. With all this in place, the manager was able to pay off the restaurant, which he bought for $1 million in just 5 years. He's been the owner since my girlfriend retired and sold him the restaurant in 2012. The malicious compliance is that since my girlfriend bought the restaurant in the 70s, no cook has ever quit, and a few of their kids and grandkids now work there as well. So the other restaurants who have a high turnover could never get one of her cooks. Our next story is, all modifications must be restored to the original. I told this story to a friend. She suggested I share it here. My family and I moved into a house in 2008, 5 bedrooms, 3,200 square foot, $1,600 a month. It was a decent price in 2008, and the rent stayed the same for many years. Since I'm reasonably handy, I would fix things myself rather than bother an old man. I lived there so long that I also made quite a few upgrades. In 2024, the owner passed away and his son inherited the property. A week later, he gave notice of intent to inspect the property. During the inspection, he kept trying to open drawers and look through my belongings, which isn't legally allowed, and was rude when I stopped him. As he left, he handed me a notice that my rent was increasing to $4,000 monthly, about $1,000 over market value. I would have paid higher rent if it had been reasonable, but I wasn't paying that much. My month-to-month lease was worded to require 3 months' notice to raise the rent. I pointed out this fact and then gave him notice that I would be moving out at the end of that 3 months. A few days later, I was served with an eviction notice. The month-to-month lease also required 3 months' notice to evict me without cause, so he tried evicting me with cause. He claimed I had made unauthorized modifications to the house and cited the back door with a dog door installed. I still had the original door in the garage and the previous owner's permission, so it was neither unauthorized nor a modification. Regardless, the judge decided I needed to move out within 30 days or he would grant the eviction. Additionally, he explicitly ordered that all modifications be restored to the original. This is where the malicious compliance comes in, and I'm sure you already see this coming. All the smart house additions I made were removed. The tool shed in the yard was removed. The pond was filled in. Closet organizers were torn out. Garage organizers were removed. The updated appliances were replaced with basic models. Every update I made was removed, and then I moved out. He sued me for removing everything. His lawyer cited a law that says any changes to the property become part of the property, and it's illegal to remove them when vacating the property. However, my lawyer pointed out the order from the previous judge stating all modifications must be restored to the original. I provided receipts for all the things I had removed, proving I had added them and was required to remove them. I won the case, and he had to pay my legal fees. A few months later, I got a call from his sister. Some of my mail had not been forwarded, and she wanted to ensure I got it. We had a short conversation about the entire ordeal. She told me the house was actually inherited by 4 siblings. Her brother had lied to everyone. First, he had raised the rent, knowing I would move out. He already had a deal to sell the house to one of those big rental companies. He told his siblings the house had negative equity and nobody would get anything from from the sale. In reality, the house was paid off and worth about $700,000. They had made an offer on the house, which included all the stuff I later removed. He couldn't afford to replace everything, so they took him to court over the sale. Since all 4 siblings were listed as owners, all were named in the lawsuit, which is how they learned the truth. In the end, the house sold for $550,000. In exchange for not pressing fraud charges against him, his 3 siblings split the proceeds, and he got nothing. Why am I not shocked, based off of his attitude and actions alone, that this was all part of a scam to try to steal an inheritance? You know, I kind of wonder how well regarded they were in the family before this happened. Like, do you think they already were rocky in their relationship, didn't talk much? Or was this one of those things where the opportunity to get all this money for themselves made them just become a monster out of nowhere? Bed Without Cheats commented, "I'm glad he got what was coming to him in the end. Although some jail time on top wouldn't be unwelcome to the story. But I hope that 30-day eviction didn't seriously freak you up, OP. I know how hard that can be." OP responded commenting, "Jail time is still a possibility. They didn't press charges as part of their deal, but the state could still prosecute him if they want to. It's unlikely though. Moving was a pain, but I probably should have done it years ago. My kids were young when I moved in there. They're adults and on their own now. No reason to live alone in a 5-bedroom house." This next story is, "I need to work regular office hours? Sure thing. I used to work for a non-profit that has very important government contracts. My role expanded quite a bit over the years, and they weren't sure who I should report to. Now, the executive director of my state didn't like me. I think it's because I take up a lot of space when I know what I'm talking about. I wasn't thrilled when I became her direct report. She has her own problems, and I don't suffer fools when it comes to my money. Before I reported to her, my boss didn't care what hours I worked or where I worked from, which was perfect for me as a single mom of 2 who got her bachelor's and master's while working there full-time. I had weekly one-on-one meetings with my new boss, the executive director, on the days she worked from home. As a child of an addict/alcoholic, she could really tear me down sometimes, but I put up with her drunken tirades. But here's the kicker. My cousin got diagnosed with breast cancer about 4 months after her husband left her. I was her only family in the area, so I told the executive director that I would need to take her to chemo, etc. She told me that I had to take PTO for those times I was going to be with my cousin. I was a salaried employee, so I didn't understand, but whatever. And she added that I needed to be in the office from 8:30 to 5:30 every day per my contract. Great. So I started working those hours. A couple of weeks in, she asked me why I was telling my internal customers that I didn't have time to do their marketing. I told her that I was working my contract hours and was no longer logging on at home from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. to make sure everything was done. The look on her face was priceless. She didn't change her mind though. She had to hire another marketer. Not great for her non-profit budget. What's with it with people who work at non-profits being just complete monsters or total jerks? Even in non-profits, it seems like people who get in high-up positions can still be pieces of crud. Our next story is, you want me to review everything? Always? Okay. So I'm currently part-time in a pharmacy, been a tech for almost 10 years, and we're fairly busy consistently every day, even on weekends. We got metrics, we got expectations, and you guessed it, we always get more stuff to do that makes no logical sense with the demand of the store. A few months ago, our district manager came by and did an audit. We did fine besides a few things, but now required we ask for almost everything when someone picks up meds. We aren't talking about verifying allergies or conditions. No, he wants us to ask about that, immunizations, pushing for the Plus service using the online app, asking if they know someone to transfer here, basically about 12 tasks per person. The issue, as it always is with district managers, is they want metrics but don't understand how detrimental they are to ask for when you're also wanting us to get a good score, which is also ranked by how fast we service people. So we don't do all of it, but when he comes in, we have to do it. And since he was here a week ago, we decided to let him see how slow all the stuff can be. It was around 3 p.m. the Friday prior to Memorial Day, so everyone's getting set to go out of town, including him, but he's stopping in to check on things for reasons. Anyways, it's busy and we're down a person because of sickness, and since he's here, well, time to cue the malicious compliance. I have a patient come up and I ask her everything. Got allergies, medical conditions, need shots, have you heard about online delivery? Do you want to? Do you have specific questions on your med? We have an online pet pharmacy, did you know that? Also, in case you change your mind about shots, did you want to report? Need any other refills? By the time I'm done, she had to get counseled anyway, and we had a line of 6 people behind them. She asked me why there was so much to ask for a simple pickup, when I brought her down and told her, well, this is our district manager, and he wants us to make sure you're well informed. If you have questions while he's here, he'll gladly listen. Yeah, he didn't like that because she complained, and someone else in the line after did the same thing due to the wait. Anyway, soon after, we were asked to use our best judgment when it comes down to informing people for the needs of the business. Thanks, DM. This reminds me of something I heard recently from a pretty good YouTuber named Grant Harding. He's a pharmacist licensed in 3 states. It was about how, like a lot of corner stores, CVS, are now asking if you want immunizations or boosters, whilst never having checked your immunization record. Like, they will literally ask and hand out these boosters without ever actually cross-referencing, hey, maybe this person already had that. And let me clarify, I'm not saying that in any way to be anti-vaccine, I'm saying that to be anti-uninformed dumb questions. Setno8186 commented, district managers are subject to all the schemes of ladder climbers and corporate trying to gain promotions. Since they were largely successful in sales, they continue to sell ideas that look promising and should make more profit. X87 of them all battling for the same VP positions, it all runs downhill. I saw the auto parts company I joined turn sour in 13 years of this, as well as all the older retiring workers saying that they were glad to be getting out while the getting was good. Every single time. The honeymoon was long over and the corporate cheating was abominable. Each year, there was one more requirement, one more forbidden practice, but they wouldn't fire you for things unless a felony was involved. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy malicious compliance story, check out that video on the left, or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.